given that you can mix and match it between the two roles.
And speaking of Slay, let's talk real quick about bottom lane Ziggs that's won 2 games in a row now, because this is a very unusual pick that was very popular back at the start of Spring Split. And TSM is saying, you know what? Get this out of my game. Yeah. 80 carries. Where's the Bork meta?
Yep. To be fair, it is a very safe champion to play in the AD carry position. It's difficult to really play wrong unless you have poor positioning and you're always sitting on the front line. You just sit back, you throw out this poke, your ability to siege is really unmatched. And now Slay could very well be forced onto an alternative AD carry. He has brought out the Ashe and the Caitlyn and the Varus during the group stages, so he definitely has these champions in his pool. But the question is, which direction do they want to take? Conventionally, he has been more of that utility AD carry for the side of the Gigabyte Marines.
LeBlanc, a ban TSM has banned during the second phase the past couple of games. Going to go ahead and add that to their first phase ban roster this time around. One more ban from the Marines. TSM actually not targeting the jungle at all.
No, they're not. Now, I would expect the Graves to come out from the Gigabyte Marines, unless... I mean, they did, the Gigabyte Marines did bring out the Kha'Zix into Svenskeren's Graves in Game 1, so perhaps they actually just want to take the Nautilus off the board. Oh no, the Lulu, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. So now I wonder if TSM actually maybe go for a first pick Gragas here. Now, it has been a big consistent pick for Stark, but instead they're saying, you know what, we have more priority on getting ourselves a strong bottom lane.
Yep, the Karma locked in first and foremost, and they did it fast, too. They were not hesitating locking in that pick. Getting that one for themselves. Remember, the Biofrost has been drawing a lot of attention in the second half of the ban phase from the Gigabyte Marines as well, so getting that support in there is going to force them to change that strategy up a little bit.
Now, I wonder if you go for a Graves and either a Gragas, or you lock yourself in the Ashe. Because bear in mind, this is more of a comfort pick for Slay. It does provide an engage tool, and it is a pretty safe AD carry for Slay. And then if you want, on your next rotation, you can get yourself the Gragas. But I feel like if you're TSM, you want to get yourself the Gragas now. Safe top laner, see what else Stark can bring out into this matchup.
He's not actually got pre-existing information, by the way. He's just making these predictions as they happen. Calling out the champions that are going to be locked in. Vedius knows what's going through the Gigabyte Marines' mind. And what they want to have going through their minds is how good that 3-0 will feel if they can lock that in here. But Graves and Ashe, the first couple of picks of their draft. TSM now thinking about that Gragas that you mentioned earlier. But nope, instead they decide to lock in the Lee beforehand. They want to put Sven on this again, even though his performance on it was not phenomenal in game number 2. They still say, look, this is one of his staple champions. This is one he's known for. This is one that he can get us back into this series with.
Yeah, and I think that he has the ability to do it. For every down that Svenskeren has, he also has an up, right? Like, this guy definitely has the ability to turn the game around or in favor of Team Solomid. So they will net themselves the Gragas up in the top lane as well. Pretty safe now. If you're the Gigabyte Marines, I think you should actually go for the Fizz right now. You have the ability to flex it both mid and top as they have done in the past, and you're actually guaranteeing yourself a pretty potent top laner too, right? It's a really good matchup into the Gragas as well. And I think that Stark is an individual who can bust it out and can play it pretty effectively.
Well, TSM has now taken away 2 of the picks. Oh my goodness.
Okay. Now this was a support that was brought out during group stages from Archie. He played the cannon with the Sona before. So it is a very squishy champion. It is something you have to be very mindful of. However, it's great into champions like Karma who are very poke heavy. She's not quite the same as Nami, who's very much disengage orientated. She follows the style of the Gigabyte Marines, who want to fight and they want to do it in a big 5v5 scenario.
Well, that's definitely going to be an interesting pick to see. One thing I was going to mention was how TSM has taken away 2 of Gigabyte Marines' picks in the previous 2 matches. The Marines were running Karma and Gragas in both of those games, and now TSM is going to be using those. Kha'Zix also one of those champions that was showing up in both games so far, but the Marines have opted for the Graves instead this time. Remember that in game number 2 it was banned. Game number 1 it was picked up first by TSM and Svenskeren. Now into the second part of the bans, Varus will be removed by the Marines, and TSM decides to take Rumble off the table, keep it away from Stark.
So I expect, I was just about to say a second AD carry ban to come out, except I was more expecting the Caitlyn rather than the Lucian. But we do know that Turtle is the sort of player that can play both the aggressive along with the utility style of ADs. Now I think that he is hedging a little bit more towards that Caitlyn pick. Will be delayed a little bit in terms of spike, but we'll still have a very strong laning phase. And we also see the Fizz ban there. We talked about how it has the ability to go into both the Gragas and also the mid lane. but I feel like the Gigabyte Marines are guaranteed to save their mid lane pick for last. So if you're top, in terms of safe picks, I'm just trying to consider what you could go for. I mean, Camille was recently nerfed, but you could still theoretically pick it into this matchup. Starkey could also go for something like a Renekton as well. Does fall under his champion pool, and it would give him that pushing ability up in the top half of the map.
How do you keep doing it? Just one after another, after another, after another. Renekton locked in on the side of Gigabyte Marines. We talked about this team in general and the research that we did into them going into the start of MSI play-ins. We talked especially about how Renekton Elise is one of the favorite combos for Stark and Levi. Just get in there, be aggressive in the top part of the map, right? Do crazy stuff with that lockdown, that early power, as TSM decides that their comp is going to feature Ezreal and Syndra as the carries.
Now, I don't think Optimus should go for Zed here. It's so much harder to kill the AD carry when you're going up against a composition like that. I feel like you would go for something a little bit more utility-based, it seems. Now, he did bring out Zilean on day one of the plans. This goes against the typical playstyle that he is used to, but it puts more of the emphasis on the rest of his team. Optimus is confident after the performance, especially, how can you not be confident in Levi, right? He is playing the Graves, he is playing the carry, and the ability to siege and their ability to poke is so strong with the Gigabyte Marines. So this is a composition that they are very comfortable with, whereas TSM, they've built more of a poking pick style of composition, which takes a while to scale. So I want to see more slow, gradual play from the TSM squad, and I don't want to see them fall prey into these little skirmishes that Gigabyte Marines are so effective at forcing.
Problem is, with the pick composition, it's hard to pick people when they're instantly brought right back to life.
That's true, very true.
So the Zilean ultimate could be very effective at shutting down the main mission of TSM in this game, but they're going to have to make sure they find a way to work around that if they want to keep themselves afloat in this series. One more win for Gigabyte Marines will take them into qualification for the main MSI event, send TSM to the last chance match on Saturday in what would be one of the biggest upsets that we have seen in a while. But it's so close to being a reality for the Gigabyte Marines, the representative from the GPL. Surprised everyone in week number 1 by going 5-1 in their group, and some people would argue that it probably would have been a 6-0 if the last game would have mattered, but they had the spot already locked in, so still the best record in their group. Now having a great out-the-gate sprint against TSM in these first couple of matches, seeing if they can lock it in with that 3-0.
And it's fascinating because the GPL as a region, they did well at All-Stars. They've been gradually doing better and better every year. Their level has been improving. And now we've gotten to a point where Optimus, Levi, Archie, these are some old names in the League of Legends scene. These guys have been around for a while. And now they're really demonstrating to the world they have what it takes against some of the best regions in the world. Like North America has always been considered a strong region internationally. And now we're getting to see the Gigabyte Marines bring it to them, 2-0.
Slay and WildTurtle just kind of going to pass by. Nope, not anymore. One shot fired off as Turtle walks away, just taking that one, doesn't really care too much about it. No level 1 invade coming out from either side. That's a difference that we've seen between this game and the previous two. Remember that the past couple of matches, TSM has tried to move into Gigabyte Marine territory at level 1, either through the Raptor camp or through the bottom lane tri-brush. Both times it failed for them. This time around, they're saying, you know what? We tried to invade 2 games. We lost 2 games.
Let's cool out.
Maybe the invade plan isn't a good plan.
Trial and error, you know?
Maybe that don't work. Well, the Gigabyte Marines will start off Levi at his Raptor camp, clearing out those tiny ones, get level 2 fast enough to have that much more potency against the big one. Svenskeren starting his own Raptors, but Lee Sin is not the best Raptor taking champion without a decent leash. He goes pretty low doing this.
Normally you start with the W because it just gives you a bit of extra defense, and the utility that you get along with the heal is actually pretty effective. I think it's about a 6-second cooldown on W, so it's actually it's the better option when going up against the Raptors, and you kind of need the pull from your mid laner. So it's not too bad for Bjergsen. He still won't lose that much in terms of the shove because Optimus, I mean, he's playing Zilean, right? Like the bombs, pretty high cooldown early on.
Right.
But my eyes are also on the bottom lane. Like, what can we expect from WildTurtle and Biofrost into a matchup that you don't commonly see from the Sona? Pretty low in terms of mobility, but actually they get the level 2.
Archie in some trouble here. Turtle needs one more Mystic shot to do it, but will not find that. Slay having to use the heal to keep his support alive.
Now, this is much more calculated aggression from the bottom lane of TSM. They realize that they hit that level 2 spike and they want to try and take advantage of it. Sona's trading power isn't the best when your opponents have a lane advantage. So for the time being, they're just going to be on the back foot, focus on sustaining, dealing with the poke coming out from Karma. And they largely will deal or lose out on the push simply because of how great Karma is during these early levels.
Looks like it's time for Levi to work his way into the enemy jungle, Vedius. 3 minutes into the game. It's about that time.
Oh, here we go.
The gank from behind. Turtle and Biofrost have summoner spells up and ready to go. Turtle goes ahead, drops that ward back there just to make sure. Svenskeren clearing out the top part of his own jungle. Levi deciding it's time to show himself. Biofrost and Turtle recognize what's coming. Levi slides in, eats a lot of damage though, having to flash away. Turtle with first blood! Now Slay and Archie can't really find anything else. Having to back themselves away. WildTurtle with double buffs now. Very scary to deal with. Levi, his aggro finally comes back to bite him.
And we were talking about the bottom lane, and you couldn't ask for a better start. Double buff as the action continues in mid.
When I ask for a better start, this might be one, except, yes it is. Svenskeren, he misses the Sonic Wave, but they still have the setup they need. And TSM is off to a phenomenal beginning in game number 3. That's a lot of minions crashing into that tier 1 turret.
Oh, it is. Optimus does have the teleport, so we'll be able to soak up some of it. But largely, this is not going well. And Stark!
Okay! Stark's just going to be slapped around. He got to play this role the past couple of games. Now Hauntzer's on the champion. Anything you can do, I can do too.
And this is much more of what we were expecting from TSM. The synergy between Sven and Bjergsen to get him going in the middle lane. Hauntzer demonstrating his proficiency up in the top lane. And this is not typically what you would expect from the Renekton, but he's playing into the minions. He actually uses the Fury in his slice and dice. He no longer has the heal on his Q because it's on cooldown. And that's what results in him losing out on the 1v1, so just poor management of his passive right there. But also in the bottom lane, the fact that Levi comes in from the flank. You expect him. Oh, now we see a gank in mid.
Okay, Bjergsen, no flash available. Does have cleanse if that could get him out of some trouble. Getting himself away. Svenskeren jumping in, just trying to protect him a little bit better. Bjerg low, but still okay. Svenskeren going to go ahead, decide to get back to base. And for the first time, Vedius, the Gigabyte Marines early game rotation machine seems to be not working.
Certainly seems like it. They try to make things happen, and TSM respond in a way in which allows them to be the ones to gain the advantage. Really nice subtle sidestep from Bjergsen there as well to dodge the stuns coming out from Optimus, realizing that if he walks into it, that's going to be his life gone. And again, the pressure continues in the top lane.
Oh! Hauntzer has had enough.
He heard us talking about him, and he was like, oh, you guys want to say something?
This is a different TSM, Vedius. It's like TSM was just sort of goofing around the past couple of games, and now they're saying, all right, we're going to lose if we lose this game. Everybody play serious now. And they are just having an awesome early game.
Oh, they are, and this is going to mean so much for the 1v1 matchup too. The fact that Hauntzer's gotten himself 2 solo kills means that Renekton now effectively has no value in this laning phase. He can't push anymore. The fact that Hauntzer is going to be able to get early armor means that he can't even trade against him anymore. Hauntser's value in team fights is so much larger simply due to the utility that he brings. Stark is really going to struggle to find an impact, largely just because he's losing out on this 1v1.
I mean, you talk about Renekton, you talk about a champion who generally the discussion about him is, yeah, he's strong in lane, but he falls off later on. When you die 1v1 to your opponent twice in lane, you're sort of removing the strength of your champion.
Oh, for sure. And now look at the CS discrepancies as well. A solid 20 lead on every single member of Team Solomid. This is so much more of what we expected from the North American squad.
Taking those picks that the Gigabyte Marines used last game seems to be working out pretty well for them. Taking the Gragas away from Stark, taking the Karma away from Archie. Bjergsen now back on the Syndra too. Optimus just bombing the wave, trying to keep Bjergsen zoned away, and maintain control as much as he can. Bjerg doesn't really care too much about that either.
And it also ties into the investment from Levi, right? Because normally you expect him to be ganking either the top lane or the middle lane. And when you have a Renekton who ends up getting pushed in, perhaps Levi should have invested more of his resources towards the top half of the map. Perhaps he should have looked to try and snowball this Renekton up against Hauntzer, which works for them very nicely in game 1. But now he invested a gank down in the bottom lane. It ends up going horribly wrong for him. WildTurtle and Biofrost already had the stronger push, and now they're going to be winning out on the trade, along with Svenskeren looking for a dive down bot.
Svenskeren wants to make this one happen, gets the kick onto Slay, who is just going to be destroyed. WildTurtle grabbing the kill on that one, going up to 2-0 as TSM will take turret first blood 8 minutes in.
Very clean map movements from Team Solomid. They push out the middle lane with Syndra. They make a map movement through the river, knowing that they have full vision control around the bottom half of the Gigabyte Marines jungle. And then they easily set up the dive, and Slay and Archie, they know the play is happening, but they're still level 5 and level 4. WildTurtle is level 7. The fact that TSM have just naturally a massive experience advantage, and it continues up in the top lane.
Meanwhile, top lane, I don't even know what to say about that one. Hauntzer with his 3rd solo kill! The man is running wild! True Shot Barrage fired off, not gonna find its way onto Optimus, predicting him to maybe back up in that brush, but he won't be.
5,000 gold lead onto TSM right now.
Svenskeren taking down the Elemental Drake, the first Elemental Drake of this series that will go the way of TSM, Vedius.
Oh boy, that was close. I mean, it's tough to know what the right. TSM are just playing immaculately right now. They are really putting the hurt onto the Gigabyte Marines. We just saw such great early play on all 3 lanes. The dive in mid, the turnaround in bot, the solo kills up top lane.
And those solo kills, that's the Hauntzer that people were
exactly
expecting to see coming into this game. That's the guy who, remember, in NALCS this split, we had a lot more Korean talent coming into the top lane. There were a lot of questions about whether the current NALCS top laners from 2016 would be able to stand up against them. And Hauntzer just rose to the occasion, still being one of the best, if not the best top laner in the NALCS. And then to come into this series in the first 2 games and just have subpar performances that he didn't accomplish a lot on, this is his redemption.
Yep. And if you're the Gigabyte Marines, that now you have to try and figure out how to play from a 5K gold deficit against a team that knows extremely well how to snowball their advantages. Know that they've kept their bottom lane in the bottom half of the map, but I expect to see Biofrost start roaming around along with Svenskeren and maybe even Bjergsen too, to invest deeper vision so they can start taking these other tier 1 towers and extend their control over the game.
And playing from that kind of a deficit is always hard, but it's especially difficult when you have a team like Gigabyte Marines whose experience doesn't lend them towards that situation ever. This is a very dominant team in the GPL. They're never sitting at a 5,000 gold deficit early on. This is not something that normally happens.
So, but also getting 2-0'd by the Gigabyte Marines is also not what normally happens to teams from mid, right? So the fact that they've been able to bounce back in such a...
Oh, even stealing the damn wolf.
You will have nothing, Gigabyte Marines.
And you will like it. Gigabyte Marines trying to hold their own jungle, but as soon as Hauntzer steps up, they got to step back. And Gragas very, very scary right now. Optimus and Slay trying to get their fancy feet on, dodge away from some skill shots. Turtle going to be in some trouble and deleted just a little bit too far forward.
Wouldn't be a TSM game if WildTurtle didn't get caught.
If WildTurtle didn't get caught at least once, I don't know what we'd be watching, but that's a catch that's going to buy Gigabyte a little bit of time maybe, or the TSM push might just take this down regardless.
TSM feel that they have the level advantage, they have the gold advantage, and they're going to go for time.
Very nice combo from Hauntzer. The Zilean save going to be big, though, as Hauntzer gets chain CC'd and can't do anything about it. Nice turnaround from Gigabyte Marines.
So, this time round, Gigabyte Marines are able to punish the dive from Team Solomid. They feel confident enough to try and set up onto the tower that they can even go for the dive. They feel like, hey, you know, we've got such a big gold advantage. There's no reason why, at the very least, we can't burn that Zilean ultimate. They are not expecting the return from the Gigabyte Marines. Good flash there from Slay.
Slay staying alive. Archie barely surviving, even after exhausting the Syndra. You talked about the squishiness of the Sona when they locked it in, Vedius, and the champion's very easy to kill if you aren't watching. Svenskeren trying to get in there, but the minion eats the Sonic Wave instead.
This will be another tower going in favor of TSM. Good control overall. The fact that they've now taken all the outer objectives, likely going to be waiting for the next Infernal Drake to spawn so they can pick that one up for themselves and then start working their way onto these tier 2s. The tier 2s become a little bit harder because you have to utilize more map movements, so you gain control of the jungle and then you rotate between either top and mid or mid and bot while you keep Hauntzer off onto a side lane. But given the way that they're playing and the way that they traditionally play during the regular season when they have a lead, you would expect TSM to start very efficiently closing out this game.
And one thing to still keep in mind along with that is Stark is mostly still a non-factor.
Yep.
He's a level down, almost 2 levels down. Hauntzer will take level 11 right now. He's got 40 less farm, and he's 0-3-0. This is effectively a 4v5 for the time being for the Gigabyte Marines.
And it's funny how at the very start during Champion Select, we talked about how Optimus will move away from these carries and shift onto more of a utility mid laner to play around his team.
Right.
And the one instance where he does, Levi isn't having the same sort of game that you would expect from him. Stark is dying 1v1 in the lane. The bottom lane ends up going horribly wrong because of WildTurtle and Biofrost getting the turnaround. So now Optimus can't really have an impact either because he's got no team to play around.
Right, it's just the situation that he put himself in by picking a utility mid laner instead of something like a Zed, or instead of something like a Syndra that we see Bjergsen on again this game. 0-0 and 1 for him. Morello Namicon and Sorcerer's Shoes. He's got the cooldown reduction and the mana he needs to just keep on spamming. And a blue buff always makes that job easier to go with it. 50 seconds till Infernal Drake spawns, and you can bet TSM's going to be locking that one down.
Only 14.5 minutes into the game, and TSM have a 5,500 gold lead. Just unbelievable how swiftly they dismantled the Gigabyte Marines.
And I think a lot of it came down to the way the draft was done, taking away some of those big picks that Gigabyte Marines were using to be so effective. TSM properly denied them. They were able to make the adjustments they needed, and we talked about that going into this. Adjusting in a best of 5 is actually a huge part of it. It can mean the difference between winning and losing sometimes.
Oh, it certainly can. I do feel that we're going to see a lot more value on this Gragas pick coming into the rest of the game, should TSM be able to close this one out. I mean, in terms of expectations, you would imagine that a team with this kind of a gold lead at this point of the game...
We can't even talk about expectations. Yeah. That's the problem. Just because of the way games 1 and 2 played out, but Infernal Drake will drop to TSM. That's two Elemental Drakes, to 0 for these guys. Still sitting on almost a 6K gold lead, 15.5 minutes in, but now, what do they do with that? How do they translate that into an even greater lead? You mentioned how it's harder to push onto those tier 2s now, but that's what they've got to start doing. Yep,
well, they have some big item spikes to help them do it. Trinity Force being completed onto Bjergsen, onto Turtle rather. While Bjergsen has...
that would be a new one.
It would definitely be a new one. Instead, he's going to stick to the stand and Morello Nomicon. Given that they have pretty significant item advantages over their lane counterparts, I mean that TSM have, I suppose, 2 options. They could just group mid and siege and go for a risky dive, but always you have to respect the idea that Optimus can just revive someone. So even if you pick someone underneath the turret, that could actually end up going horribly wrong for you like it did earlier on for Hauntzer. So instead, the better way is to just start moving into the enemy jungle and just get that deep vision down. You want to make sure that you have full control over what Gigabyte Marines are trying to do in their own half of the map, and then you either look for a pick, or instead you just constantly rotate between 2 lanes and just gradually siege down onto these turrets.
And I like what we're seeing from Svenskeren in this game too, because he's not doing that, I've got to make a play, I got to get in, let's just go right now type of stuff that we saw in game number 2. He's playing it more slowly. It's like they said, hey, look, we're going to win this game, but we got to make sure we're smart about it instead of just trying to make it happen right now, right here, all the time, go, 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 110%. 1-0 and 1 on the Lee Sin. Best performance yet. Bjergsen, though, caught out, bursted down, no way out of there. Kill credit goes over to Levi. That's his first one of the game.
So Gigabyte Marines, they actually find themselves a pick onto Bjergsen, who was really overextending himself in the top, or through the middle lane. He thought that he could get himself a pick onto Archie. He saw how much damage he did earlier on, and perhaps the bloodlust clouded his eyes. This will give a little bit more freedom to the Gigabyte Marines now. They can buy a little bit more time, given that the powerful mid laner of TSM is now taken off the map.
Hauntzer picking himself up a Rift Herald, a seldom taken buff. Usually that thing only goes down when you're so far ahead that you just are looking for something to do. And that's kind of where Hauntzer is. I mean, with the lead that he currently has over his lane opponent, it's only going to be scarier as Optimus uses the ulti on himself, and Turtle knows to let that expire before finding the last auto attack to take him down.
I like the patience there from Turtle. He knew that Optimus wasn't getting out. Talking about overextended mid laners, that was exactly the same there for Optimus. He had no control over the river. Ends up getting collapsed upon as a result. But now Bjergsen has respawned, and one of your main wave clearers in the Zilean has now been taken off the map. So that small amount of time that you were trying to buy for yourself has now disappeared. And TSM will return to their siege.
Meanwhile, Hauntzer just keeps on pushing in the top lane, maintaining that 40 CS advantage. TSM looking to see if they can set something up with Svenskeren over this wall. A ward will spot him out, so Slay and Archie are very aware of exactly what these guys are planning. Levi getting himself away from Hauntzer, who uses the explosive cast to buy himself some time, flashes over the wall, and he'll be out of there. He buys enough time, distracts enough members of Gigabyte Marines for the rest of TSM to take down the tier 2.
It's just desperation plays now from the Gigabyte Marines. Teleport and 3 men were invested into trying to kill Hauntzer, and he walks away scot-free without even taking that much damage. Now the arrow lands on a Bjerg.
Oh, Bjergsen again going to be locked down, but Optimus is out of there. Cannot even chrono break himself. Nice catch from TSM along with another tier 2.
The turnaround from TSM as Gigabyte Marines try to make a play happen was so clean. The Gigabyte, they just got completely zoned away from that engagement, and it allowed TSM to pick themselves up another tier 2 tower. Full control. This is the TSM that the fans and the viewers were all predicting to come into this series.
Absolutely is. This is what a lot of people wanted to see from game number 1. It was just kind of, where are they? What are they doing? Where has this TSM been for the first couple of games? But it seems like they finally found their mojo. They finally found how they're going to be able to win this, and they show no signs of stopping. There have been a couple of picks onto WildTurtle, onto Bjergsen that have paid off for the Gigabyte Marines and have allowed them to stabilize a little bit. But look at Levi, 1, 1, and 2 on the Graves. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad score, but on a team where you're the catalyst for everybody making moves happen, where you're the guy who always gets everything going, if that's all the further you are 20 minutes into the match, who else is going to make those plays?
And it's fascinating how in game 1, Gigabyte Marines were able to snowball a game after one small mistake from TSM. And now here in game 3, we see exactly the same situation except in reverse, where TSM, they were able to find a small window with which they look to punish, but then also you have to give props because Hauntzer made his own advantages in the top lane. That was no gank. That was the, I mean, I suppose it was,
that was just 1v1 outplay.
But that was just Hauntzer destroying his lane counterpart.
Hauntzer doing Hauntzer things. Levi also, that mistake at the level 3 gank bottom side, just, that was essentially gifting double buffs and a kill over to your opponents. It's not like Svenskeren was there and turned it around.
Yeah.
Levi just made the wrong play.
He did. He was not expecting the burst from Biofrost, that's for sure. And now the Baron is up. You can see how much vision is invested from TSM into around the red buff area of Gigabyte Marines. This could be Stark dying once more.
Uh-oh, Stark. He has to pop the ulti just to try to stay alive. And flash. And he's still dead. Oh!
Brutal.
Oh, it's gotta hurt. 4-1 and 1 on Hauntzer's Gragas. Sunfire Cape plus Iceborne Gauntlet. Stark can't even hurt the dude. And now it's a 5v4. They're gonna push onto the inhibitor turret itself here in the bottom lane. If they can take that inhibitor down, that's the most important one for going for Baron. Remember, pressure on the opposite side of the map makes it very hard to contest that, especially this early on into the game. Still 10 seconds or so before Stark makes his way back into the game, and TSM is not going to risk it. Instead, they just allowed Turtle to take the T2 top and back themselves away.
Very patient play from TSM, taking their time. It would be so difficult for them to lose this game, so there's no need for them to do anything crazy, right? Like, why give your opponents windows with which they can come back? Instead, just take it calm, be cool,
your 1% loss opportunity is doing something stupid in the enemy base.
Exactly.
So why not do something smart and not allow yourself to do that?
Exactly. So Baron is another option for them. They can just continue with what they're doing. They know that Hauntzer will win this 1v1. I think after the 4th time, you'd be pretty confident that Hauntzer could win it.
Pretty convincing argument at this point, I'd say. Hauntzer 4-1-1, 0-4-0 for Stark. Even though there's 3 kills on the Marines, he's not been a part of anything so far. 70 CS now, too, separating these 2 top laners.
The Flame Horizon is a-coming, but the game might end before we even get there.
Yeah, it actually might. We're coming real close to this one potentially being over. If TSM can lock away this victory, they're over 10,000 gold up just 23 minutes in. Bottom lane inhibitor exposed. Vision in the upper river around Baron. 2-shot barrage fired through. Not going to steal the red buff away like he did the Wolf earlier. Good attempt. No, it was just mostly for scouting purposes anyway.
If I'm nitpicking, I feel like Sven at this point should be moving more with Biofrost to start getting vision around the entrances to the jungle of Gigabyte Marines rather than doing his Krogs, but it is naturally nitpicking. Meanwhile, Hauntzer is pretty overextended in the bottom lane, but he's level 15 at 23.5 minutes into the game, so I think he's okay. And the pressure will just continue. A lot of focus is being spent around this Baron, and TSM have to be very careful about how they play this because we've seen the smite wars between Levi and Svenskeren, and I do feel like that Levi is currently winning in the head-to-head.
Yeah, you don't want to take the 50-50 here. That's another one of those throw conditions we were talking about, just opening a window for your opponents to maybe come back into the game. TSM would much rather just zone them away, find some kind of a kill, make it a sure thing. Turtle very strong, 4-1-0 on him. QSS to get out of any CC-based troubles, working on that Blade of the Ruined King to go with his Mana Moon and for his Trinity Force. But now with control wards here in the pit, it's time for TSM to start up Baron.
Full vision over the Gigabyte Marines jungle. The Hawk Shot will be used to spot out the Baron, but I don't even think there's much that the Gigabyte Marines can do about it because they're going to have to face check Hauntzer.
Svenskeren and Turtle are essentially just dueling this. Levi wants to get in over the wall, but instead he's just going to be killed. He will come back through that chrono shift, but not in time to get in there as Svenskeren secures Baron. Hauntzer goes over the wall, and he is just going to 1v2 these guys all day long. Grabbing the kill onto that Gigabyte Marines Graves, and now looking to make it the Zilean 2. Svenskeren comes in, grabs himself the kill. And that's 2 plus Baron for nothing going the way of TSM.
Very easy Baron takes Stark. He's just trying to get the scraps. Gigabyte Marines, they're not even going to go bother back to base. They know that the game is done. They know that there's nothing that they can do. Levi tries to get the steal, but then Hauntzer, he's just too strong.
He's so strong in this game right now. And that's going to be pretty much all she wrote. They take down the top lane inhibitor turret, take down the top lane inhibitor. Mantra Inspire is going to keep this team as strong as humanly possible. Levi now back alive. Stark going to be juggling around. Svenskeren able to go in, find the kick backwards onto Slay, who's going to escape for now. Turret destroyed though. WildTurtle pouring some damage back into the fight. The Nexus now down below half. Slay going to be dropping next. And ladies and gentlemen, we are heading to Game 4.
I was not expecting the Game 4 to come in this order.
No.
But I, in some ways, was expecting it to happen. TSM with an exceptionally clean game.
Yeah.
Not only did they punish the mistakes of Levi down in the bottom lane, but they also built their own advantages in the mid lane with Sven and Bjerg, and Hauntzer getting himself so many great solo kills up in the top. It was just so much of the classic TSM that you'd expect. The 2 solo laners going off, the fact that the bottom lane gets a slight lead, just beautiful execution from the TSM squad.
It really was the cleanest game easily that we've seen so far in this series. And for an in-depth look at exactly how TSM came back and kept themselves afloat, let's send it over to the analysts.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think we should just jump right into it, jump right into our first replay, our Acer replay. Hauntzer, an absolute monster in the top lane. We wanted to see TSM get an advantage. It was each individual member of this team over-contributing, I would say, in the early game.
And the thing is, we heard that maybe like Stark had the Renekton as one of these power plays, picks for himself, but just doesn't quite respect the damage from the minions early on, and every single time Hauntzer just walks back up to him and destroys him.
Yeah, he's having a bit of a nightmare, I think, at the top lane. Not a great day. The rest of the map was probably watching him and saying, what is going wrong? But unfortunately for pretty much all of the Gigabyte Marines, it wasn't just this happening in the top lane. Pretty much everywhere you looked, TSM had absolute control. There was really no way into that game for them, except for maybe desperate steals from about 4 minutes.
And we saw in kind of even games, Gigabyte Marines always felt like a team that could fight back. But when TSM built what ended up being an insurmountable gold lead, it feels like these guys just could not do anything in this game overall.
And I think that's honestly what we expected coming into game one. Like, realistically, the reason everybody said TSM should be the favorite team is because that game, if you take it on its own, is what everybody thought game one would look like too. And as we look at further replays from this, you can see how clean TSM, when playing with the lead, can be. I mean, the dive under mid tower is the replay that we want to take a look at. They just go aggressive, get the kills, and just take the tower from it. Like, at this point, the game is already basically out of reach for the Gigabyte Marines. Maybe if somehow they can layer the crowd control perfectly, but TSM, they're in, they're out right before any reaction can really come from the Gigabyte Marines, and it's already gone.
Bjergsen's there. Yeah. Svenskeren's hitting the kicks this time. WildTurtle was actually 2-0 up in lane. They defused Levi's first initial gank. Everything that TSM did in game number 3 is indicative of where it's meant to be for this team. Contrasting that, however, we saw Graves from Levi, which I think should have been something like the Elise.
We'll have to see what they want to do, but as we look still at this game, kind of, TSM, they did take a risk in the final moments to try to secure that Baron. You heard Captain Flowers, you heard Vedius talking about it. This is one of those lost conditions. This is one of those areas where you can throw, but they played so well around this, using Hauntzer to block this out. Turtle fearlessly going over the wall, and I have to say, just a clean Baron take overall.
Yeah, and the decision to go for this Baron is realistically, once you get it, the game is over. Yep. So everything is thrown at trying to take the Baron away, but you cannot get through the indomitable Gragas that is just running at everybody. Stacked armor, Levi is just stuck losing, and there's not enough damage that comes out of a more so supportive mid laner, especially in a losing game. So smart item build, I would say, from Hauntzer, and a well-deserving victory.
You can see how fast the game ends, the low damage all over the place. I mean, some fast math, not quite enough, but Hauntzer nearly out-damaged the entire team with the Gigabyte Marines. A couple of thousand short on that, but
I mean, just
impressive.
It's absolutely insane how little League of Legends Gigabyte Marines got to play that game. And you feel for them because they went from controlling the map, dominating, playing out these skirmish extended fights, but you just can't afford to get that far behind that early on. That was, I think, one of the most one-sided games we've seen throughout the course of this entire tournament.
Yeah, and one big thing you have to remember, though, when you're looking at this, yes, it's now 2-1 in a series, but it was also Gigabyte Marines pulling out the Zilean Sona composition. They tried it during the group stages of the play-ins, and it was successful to a degree because they were unlocked in laning phase. But now you're against a higher caliber of laner, where you're going to have a harder time actually executing on this comp. I think they just go back to standard.
And we saw exactly that in the bottom lane. The Sona chunked out early, forced the heal. The lack of a heal meant when Levi did go aggressive in the bottom lane, it wasn't really able to keep him alive through the tail end of that to end up in the first couple of kills. So that was one of the real issues with that Sona that we were talking about. I know we're going to discuss this a little bit more as we go through, but I want to see them go back to the first 2 game style compositions, less on the utility.
All right, well, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but we're going to be stepping away. Don't go anywhere, because when we return, it is game 4 between the Gigabyte Marines and TSM.